Brother, you have your... let me introduce you first. طبعا I would like to introduce my friend, close friend, thank you, my close friend, Brother Chet Sisk. Brother Chet Sisk. Brother Chet Sisk, he's one of our also coordinators and leaders of Inspiration Economy in America and in Canada. Chet, he's been with us, we got to know him through my son, Abdullah, in Albania. I'm not sure if the Albanian people is here or not. And then since then we have been in communication with Chet. We had many projects coming up, especially in America. And Chet, he was also one of the founders of Inspiration, the International Inspiration Economy Project. He's very excited to come always wherever I ask him, whether it's in Bahrain or in India and everywhere. And always he really gives lots of his time to come all the way in his own expenses. So let's give him applause for this spirit.
I'm what is known as a futurist. My job is to talk about what's going to happen over the next 2 to 3 years. My focus has been on climate change, because climate change is going to affect all of our lives. So I thought about it in the context of legacy, that our job is to make sure that we take in the assessment of what happens with climate change and how it will affect what we do, what our children will do, and what our children's children will do. This is the most important work there is, as far as I'm concerned. So I'm going to break down some basics about it, because I think what has happened when we talk about climate change is that we only talk about it from the effects of what we don't want. That rising temperatures, climate conditions, drought, floods, all of those things, that's the only context that we tend to talk about climate change from. And I want to introduce another version. The other version of climate change is that it is an opportunity for us to reimagine our lives going forward. We can reimagine our lives for our children. We can reimagine how things work. That's different, because we usually talk about it from the negative. I'm going to talk about it from the positive. I'm going to talk about it from the place of a regenerative community. A regenerative community is a community that leverages the crisis of climate change to retool its economy, brings together new technology with old wisdom, and develop a new economic abundance strategy that looks after the planet and the people. That is different than how we used to walk through the world, where we usually talked about it from the planet as something that we did something against, but now we work in partnership with that. That is what's called a regenerative community. We regenerate, become even greater. It's okay. Okay. There is an estimated $26 trillion in regenerative reimagined communities through a low-carbon economy, with the development of 65 million new jobs and trades. That's something that we haven't talked about, that if we started thinking about a regenerative community, a regenerative society, all all of a sudden we start to talk about the job that we can produce. We start talking about lifting people out of poverty. We start talking about creating more connectedness. That's different. We know that 1 million premature deaths around the world will be eliminated if we move to a carbon-related or reduced environment that emphasizes clean air and even cleaner water. We're not used to that because, again, when we talk about climate change, we talk about all the things that are going to be taken, but the reality is that climate change, if we manage it right, can give us more lives, can take care of our children. Some areas where we haven't been able to focus on, climate change will make us focus on the most important things, and that is the babies. We can start to develop new kinds of communities. The hottest new entrepreneurial ventures out there are, of course, climate sustainable homes. Homes that are more efficient, more effective, that can protect us out of heat and cold, simply because now we get a chance to focus on the things that are important. The wisdom and insights and sustainable philosophies of our ancestors now become critically important. At one time when we used to talk about our ancestors, we talk about them as not being modern. But now we're finding out that our ancestors actually had an understanding about sustainability that we threw away, but now we can recover, simply because climate change is forcing us to recover that which we lost. We used to call it Sankofa, going back to get what you lost. Also, climate resilient households will increase efficiencies all the way around the world. It will help us develop a healthier relationship to the planet and appreciate its value. And I'm a person of faith, and I'm sure you are too, that is part of our faith, is how we are stewards here, how we are taking care of this. A lot of times we've taken it for granted. Climate change is forcing us to come back to that commitment, that responsibility. It's also asking us to take care of the water. The reality is that water is going to become a challenging issue for all nations over the next few years. Our ability to focus on the efficiency of how we manage that will make all the difference. Now, how do we get there? That's Star Trek up there. I'm a Trekkie, so I have to put that up there as much as I can. First, we do an assessment. How will climate change affect your community? What tools exist to help mitigate the negative effects? What will it mean for your quality of life? And what are the political impacts? These are not bad questions. They're great questions because they finally get us a chance to ask questions that we should have been asking a long time ago. How do we become more efficient, more effective, smarter, more thoughtful, and more abundant about our world other than how we did it before, when we were just hoping for the best and hope that it would all catch up with us at some point in time. Now we can use the technology to ask these kinds of questions. Not just the technology to build different things, but also the technology to say, how can we become better human beings? How can we live out our faith, truly? How can we make sure that we have connection all the way around the world? How can we reimagine how the world works? There's enough, I can tell you this, used to work in the technology field. There is enough technology out there right now that could save the planet immediately. It's not a matter if the technology doesn't exist. It is that we haven't allocated the technology to the right issues. We have been allocating a lot of the technology to things that are not necessary. Now we can do that. We can rethink it. That's assessment. The second part of that is consultation. You'll need an experienced team to help you walk through this kind of thinking, global experience, respect of politics. So now when we talk about how are we going to do this, you have to have consultation and support that at least helps you to think about it from the perspective of what works, what doesn't work, what has worked in other communities, what has worked better than other things, what has not worked, so that we can avoid that kind of technology or those kinds of methods. What things make sense for us? What things are consistent with our beliefs? What things respect our communities and our traditions? How can we make that work? We get a chance to ask those important questions and be diligent about it, because that's what consultation will do. The consultation about how do we make climate change work for the greater good is really the question. And then after consultation, of course, it's the plan of action. That's when you get to a place where you think about the next 1 to 2 years. Some people say 2 to 3. I said 2 to 3 when I started. But I say that we're at a place now, because climate change is affecting things so rapidly, that now we have to start asking questions from the next year to year so that we can navigate this much more effectively, as opposed to hoping for the best. Year to year. And some people would say day to day. It is that kind of dramatic change that's affecting all of our lives. We also have to have a robust and agile enough management team so that we understand a lot of parts about climate change are unknowns. We don't know. We simply don't know. And so we get a chance to ask about the unknown, and then we have to ask about thoughtful and moral grounding. Make sure we ask the most important question, and that is this the right thing to do? Is it good? Is it honorable? Is it respecting of our faith? Is it consistent with what we believe? And so my group, and hopefully when we bring the conference over to the United States, or maybe to Canada within the next year or so, my group wants to be a part of that. That's what we do. We tie all of those things into one thing, so that climate change and income inequality and poverty and all of those things are not separate or siloed, but they are one thing. If you have any questions about anything that I said, I am more than happy to answer those questions. And I think we may even have a chance to do a workshop where we do some real life scenarios where you tell us about what you know to be true, and then my job is to try to answer how we would deal with that in relationship to climate crisis. Thank you so much.
After tomorrow, for 2 days, we have a workshop. So welcome to attend and register on this workshop. Thanks a lot. Sorry for that.